Your Honor, I have a question for the witness. The boy's voice barely reached the microphone. He was 10 years old. He wore his only suit, the sleeves rolled twice, the jacket still smelling faintly of the thrift store rack it came from. He wasn't a lawyer, not legally, not officially, but the actual attorney assigned to the case had quit 3 days earlier, and the boy refused to let his father go down without a fight. The judge almost laughed him out of the room. But here's what nobody in that courtroom expected. This child had spent 14 months reading every page of his father's case file, and he'd found the one question nobody else had thought to ask. Not a clever trick, not a loophole, just one simple question that the entire 15-year sentence had been quietly built on top of. Stay with this one, because in the next few minutes, a 10-year-old is about to do something 3 professional attorneys couldn't. He's about to take apart a conviction with a single sentence. Eli Whitfield was 10 years old, and for 14 months, he'd been living 2 completely different lives. By day, he was a 5th grader who liked dinosaurs, hated long division, and got picked last for kickball because he was small for his age. By night, he sat at his aunt's kitchen table, with a legal pad and a highlighter, working his way through a case file thicker than his school backpack, the kitchen light burning long after his aunt assumed he'd fallen asleep. His father, Marcus Whitfield, had been convicted 14 months earlier of armed robbery, a charge he denied from the very first night police showed up at their apartment. The prosecution's case rested almost entirely on one eyewitness, a gas station clerk who identified Marcus from a photo lineup 3 weeks after the incident. There was no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no recovered weapon. Just one man's memory and a photo in a folder. Eli didn't understand legal procedure. He didn't understand chain of custody or reasonable doubt. But he understood his father, and his father had been home with him that night, watching the same rerun they always watched on Thursdays. Nobody believed a 10-year-old's bedtime memory over a clerk's sworn testimony, and Eli had carried that disbelief like a stone in his chest for 14 months. The court-appointed attorney handling the appeal, a tired man named Gary Pruitt, had taken on Marcus's case along with 40 others. He met with Marcus twice. He filed the paperwork. He didn't read the full file, because there were never enough hours in a week to read every full file on his desk. What he didn't know was that Eli had read every single page of it, twice, circling the same detail, over and over again. A detail buried on page 47 of the original police report. A line so easy to overlook between dense paragraphs of standard procedural language. 3 days before the appeal hearing, Gary Pruitt called Eli's aunt and quietly withdrew from the case, citing a scheduling conflict that was really just exhaustion. The court scrambled to assign a replacement, but the public defender's office was drowning, and the earliest available attorney couldn't take the case for another 6 weeks. 6 weeks Marcus didn't have. Marcus's appeal window was closing in 72 hours. Eli's aunt, Denise, raised him in Marcus's absence, working double shifts at a diner to keep him fed and in school. She loved her nephew fiercely, but she had no legal training, no money for a private attorney, and no idea how to stop the clock from running out on her brother's last chance. She'd already called 4 law firms that week, and all 4 had said some version of the same thing. Not enough time, not enough budget, not enough certainty of a win to justify taking it on. What she didn't know was that Eli had already decided he wasn't going to let that clock win. And then, 3 days before the hearing, Eli asked her one question that changed everything. Can a kid talk in court if nobody stops him? The morning of the hearing, Judge Patricia Alvarez looked up from her docket and saw a small boy in an oversized suit standing at the defense table, alone, holding a manila folder against his chest like a shield. He'd practiced this moment in the bathroom mirror 3 separate times that week, and none of those rehearsals had prepared him for how loud his own heartbeat would sound in an actual courtroom. "Where is counsel for the defense?" she asked. "I'm here, Your Honor," Eli said. A ripple of laughter moved through the gallery. The prosecuting attorney, a sharp-suited man named Daniel Reyes, didn't even bother hiding his smirk. The Judge Alvarez removed her glasses. "Son, this is a felony appeal hearing. Where is your father's attorney?
He withdrew 3 days ago, Eli said, voice shaking, but steady. Nobody else could take the case in time. So I read the whole file myself. I'm not a lawyer. I know that. But I found something, and I need somebody to hear it before my dad runs out of time. He swallowed hard after saying it. The longest sentence he'd ever had to deliver to a room full of strangers. The judge studied him for a long moment, her expression somewhere between disbelief and curiosity. Then she did something nobody expected. She didn't throw the case out. She asked him to continue. Your Honor, this is absurd, Reyes said, rising from his seat. The court cannot allow an unrepresented minor to argue a felony appeal. This is a procedural circus. He gestured broadly toward Eli, as if presenting evidence of the room's collective insanity. Judge Alvarez held up a hand. Mr. Reyes, your concern is noted, but the defendant currently has no counsel. His appeal window closes in less than 72 hours, and I'm not interested in adding, denied a hearing entirely, to the list of things wrong with this case. She turned to Eli. You get 10 minutes. Use them wisely. Eli's hands trembled as he opened the manila folder. Inside were photocopied pages, sticky notes peeking out from dozens of spots, and one page, page 47, worn soft from being folded and unfolded so many times, it had nearly torn along the trem crease. The eyewitness, Eli said. Mr. Holloway, the gas station clerk. He said he saw my dad clearly, under the store lights at 11:40 p.m. That's correct, Reyes said, impatient. It's in his sworn statement. But page 47 of the police report, Eli continued, says the store's lighting system failed that same night. A maintenance log. The lights went out at 11:15 p.m. and weren't fixed until the next morning. He held the page up slightly, his hand shaking, but his voice didn't waver this time. The courtroom went quiet in a different way now. Not amused, but uncertain. The kind of silence where you can hear pens stop moving and chairs stop creaking. If the lights were off, Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying across the entire room. How did Mr. Holloway see my dad's face clearly enough to pick him out 3 weeks later? Reyes stood quickly. Your Honor, this is a maintenance log, not verified testimony. The clerk could have used a flashlight, emergency lighting. Then why? Judge Alvarez interrupted, her tone sharpening. Does Mr. Y. Holloway's original statement specifically say he saw the suspect clearly under the overhead lights? Counsel, was this maintenance log included in the discovery provided to the original defense attorney? A long pause stretched across the room, the kind of silence that feels heavier the longer it lasts. I would need to check the record, Your Honor, Reyes said, his confidence visibly cracking, his eyes darting toward his own assistant for help that wasn't coming. He shuffled through his own folder, looking for anything that could undo what had just been said out loud. Check it now, Judge Alvarez said. The court clerk pulled the original discovery file. Page by page, the room watched in silence as she confirmed it. The maintenance log had been filed with the police report, but it had never been flagged, never cross-referenced, never shown to the jury at trial. It had simply sat there, 3 pages behind a stack of evidence photos, waiting for someone curious enough to keep turning. Eli's father, Marcus, sitting at the defense table beside his son, put his hand over his mouth, his eyes filling with tears he was trying desperately to hold back. 14 months of carefully built composure, threatening to give way all at once. Your Honor, Eli said, his voice cracking now, the weight of 14 months finally catching up to him. My dad was home with me that night. I know nobody believed me before, but I think maybe the lights not working means somebody else didn't really see him either. You could feel, in that room, 14 months of a child's quiet, stubborn work colliding with a detail that 3 trained professionals had walked straight past without ever stopping to souse. Look down at page 47. Judge Alvarez didn't rule immediately. She took a recess, the kind of recess that stretches for an hour, while a courtroom sits in nervous, electric silence, lawyers murmuring in the hallway, nobody quite willing to leave, in case they miss the moment everything gets decided. When she returned, she didn't waste time on formalities. This court finds that critical exculpatory evidence, the lighting maintenance log, was
never disclosed or examined during the original trial, in violation of the defendant's right to a fair proceeding, she said. I am vacating the conviction and ordering a new trial, with the prosecution required to address this evidence directly. She paused, glancing briefly at Eli before continuing with the rest of her ruling. A small acknowledgement that didn't need any further words attached to it. The gallery erupted, not in laughter this time, but in something closer to disbelief, mixed with relief. A low murmur of voices that the judge let run for a few seconds, before raising her hand for quiet. Marcus turned to his son, both of them crying openly now. 14 months of fear, breaking apart in a single moment. You did this, Marcus said, voice breaking completely. You actually did this. He pulled his son into a hug, right there at the defense table, not caring who was watching, not caring that the judge was still technically on the bench. I just read page 47, Eli said, wiping his face with his sleeve. Like 100 times. He said it almost apologetically, as if 100 rereadings of one page didn't feel like enough to deserve the look his father was giving him. Here's the meaning moment, the part that makes this more than a viral courtroom clip. Eli Whitfield didn't win his father's case because he was clever, or lucky, or because television made law look simple. He won it because he refused to accept that his father's freedom was someone else's job to care about. He read every page because nobody told him he couldn't. And it turned out the system didn't fail because the truth wasn't when. It failed because nobody had bothered to look closely enough to find it. A tired attorney with 40 cases doesn't have the luxury of reading page 47 twice. A 10-year-old with one father has nothing but time. That image, a boy and his father, walking out of a building that almost took 14 more years, from them, is the freeze frame the whole story builds toward. Not triumph for its own sake, just a son who never stopped believing his father deserved someone in his corner, even when that someone had to be a 10-year-old in a suit 2 sizes too big, holding a folder that smelled like late nights and highlighter ink. He didn't need a law degree to ask the right question. He just needed to care enough to keep reading, long after everyone else had decided the case was already settled. After everything Eli and his father went through, 14 months of a case file at a kitchen table, 3 days of a closing window, 10 minutes that changed everything, a single page that 3 trained professionals had walked right past. One thing becomes impossible to shake. Sometimes the people who fight hardest for justice aren't the ones with the degrees. They're the ones who refuse to stop reading. So tell me, has someone in your life ever fought for you in a way nobody expected? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and these stories matter more than you know, because they remind all of us what's possible when someone simply refuses to give up. If this one hit you in the chest even a little, hit subscribe, not for us, but for every kid out there quietly fighting for someone they love. And if this story stayed with you, wait until you see what happens when a waitress recognizes a customer's voice from a missing persons case 9 years cold, a case everyone else had quietly given up on. Until then, take care of each other.